Good evening. I'm Jennifer Brown, Director of the Center for Literary Arts at Frostburg State University, and I'd like to welcome you to this kickoff reading for the 15th Annual Western Maryland Independent Literature Festival, featuring Rick Campbell. First, I'd like to say that this reading is hosted by the Center for Literary Arts at Frostburg State University and sponsored by the Allegheny Arts Council and several offices at Frostburg State, including the Office of the President, the Office of the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, the Department of English and Foreign Languages and Literature, and is also supported by the City of Frostburg. We're joined this evening by Rick Campbell, whose newest book is Provenance, published by Blue Horse Press. His other titles include Gunshot, Peacock Dog, The History of Steel, Dixmont, The Traveler's Companion, Setting the World in Order, which won the Walt McDonald Prize, and A Day's Work. Campbell directed Anhinga Press for over 20 years, co-founded the Florida Literary Arts Coalition and its Other Words Conference. He teaches at Sierra Nevada University's MFA program and lives on Alligator Point, Florida, some of which you'll see in the background this evening. Please join me in welcoming Rick Campbell.
Hi. Am I being heard? I hope. I want to thank everybody for inviting me here. Jennifer and the Indie Lit Festival in Frostburg State University. My whole life has been lived on some version of FSU, Florida State University, Fairmont State University, Frostburg State University, Fresno State University. It's kind of curious that there are so many of them, but so I want to thank this particular FSU for having me here and the Indie Lit Festival, which I wish we were live. It's a festival I've attended a number of times, and I really enjoy the events, especially the opening night reading at Main Street Books, which you should just imagine yourself to be at if you can. So I'm going to open up with a poem that I'm Jerry LaFemina, a good longtime friend of mine and a fine poet. And this first poem that I'm going to read from Provenance is it's dedicated to Jerry, although the epigram says after GL, because I didn't steal the poem from him, but pretty close to stealing it from him. And in fact, he even helped edit the last stanza. So if that last stanza is not any good, it's absolutely Jerry's fault. It's called Ash. And if you know Jerry's work, you know that what book this comes from. It's, I think, an Anhinga Press book. Ash, after Jerry LaFemina. I am not Ash, though I am of Ash, from J&L Steel, Armco, American Bridge, breathed, seeped through pores, swallowed with my bread. Ash, ashes, soot, the valley tattooed our bodies. Ash in our air, ash in our taps, ash in our bath, ash in our gutters, in the cracks of our sidewalks. Ash smeared cars, windows, the siding added to our houses. Ash rain darkened the stained glass of St. Joseph's Catholic Church, where ash coated pews, the collection basket, our mumbled prayers. In the 60s, old folks told us of days when the sun did not shine, streetlights blotted out. Our grandparents, blurs going to work, coming home, promises that we would one day be born, grow up, and find our way out of here. Until then, I marked my name on surfaces supposed to shine. Our car, strangers' cars parked silently near the curb as I walked to church. I broke the brown crusted snow to search for the clean and white below. Thanks, Jerry. Behind me, as Jennifer said, the trees you see, Alligator Point is a peninsula jutting out into the Gulf of Mexico, about 40 miles south of Tallahassee. And it's a dead end. Nobody comes here. because the road ends and you have to turn around and go back. And every hurricane, major or minor, wipes the one portion of the dirt road out. And if you live on the other side of it for 2 or 3 days, you can't leave your house or go anywhere. So it's really great for keeping down the population. There are no restaurants, there are no gas stations, no convenience stores, no hotels. Only gets to be a problem when you run out of beer and coffee. You really got to go somewhere, you know. But it's pretty worth it unless you live in a pandemic and you can't see anybody anyway. So this next poem is actually the last poem, if I'm not mistaken, the last poem in Provenance. And it came about weirdly. My really good friend, a poet, Alice Fryman, who I hope some of you know, sent me an email saying that she was going to have a poem in the Georgia Review, and I was going to think it was about me, and she was calling to tell me that it was going to be in there, and it wasn't really about me, although it sort of was about me. And I was like, okay, I really like to be written about, so I wasn't bothered by that. But anyway, I started thinking about it after the poem came out, and I read it, and I wrote this poem more or less for Alice and her poem, and stole this title, as you'll see. The title is "You're So Vain, You Probably Thought This Poem Was About You," thanks to Carly Simon. So this poem is me talking to Alice. Alice is the you in this poem. You're so vain, you probably thought this poem was about you. I did. I thought this could be me. I knew it was you too. Not you and me, long friends, but never tossed together by Aphrodite's urge. Still, I was never out of it because it was about love and loss and betrayal, repentance, and our stubborn will to accept what's been done as affirming the heart's wild desire. Even though that desire wrecked much of what we held dear. We succumb to what our heart and body crave. We live in the world we've made or remade, not without regret, but our regret does not wall off the world we want. We say we're sorry and we mean it. We think our friends and even those we love who we've hurt will forgive us because we love them and us and others and love itself. We're delusional, yes. We should have lived our lives with warning signs. Detour ahead, bridge ices before road surface. Maybe no words, just the swerving parallel lines on a yellow field that to others say, caution, danger, but we see a dance of long-stalked daisies swaying in the wind, and there it is, our accident coming toward us, unknowing, trusting, open. Thanks. Those are the two I was going to read from Provenance. Tonight I wanted to do like, I don't know, the last number of readings I've done, I've only gotten like 3 or 4, 5, 10 minutes, and being pretty egotistical and long-winded, I'm so happy to have a whole reading, and that I decided I would do sort of a greatest hits. And so now I'm going to read a couple from this book, if you can see. It's called The History of Steel. And it's sort of a collected poems about, I grew up in the Beaver Valley, up the Ohio River from Pittsburgh. So everything in this book has to do with that. And I think I'm going to read, two from this one. And I factored in the bears and the mosquitoes, but now I hear a rumbling up in the sky. It's either a fighter jet coming to bomb me or distant thunder. We'll see which one. You know. I'm going to dedicate this poem to Rhett Reap, who said she was going to come, but she's not going to make it either because her child is ill and she's running around where she lives looking for shots and doctors and stuff. But I'm going to read it for her anyway. It's a poem about my mother's funeral. And though my mother lived her last years, many of her last years, and died in South Florida, we buried her in West Virginia. around Dunbar and Charleston, that area. So it's the poem about taking my mother up there to bury her. I think that's about all you need to know. It's called Angels Flying You Home for Rosemary Campbell. The canal flows through Dunbar, ugly, cold, and gray as I wrote it then. Below Tyler Mountain Memory Gardens, the two-lane highway Friday nights clogs with cars. Headlights bleed into the dark and crawl to a dog-track dream, a ticket out of this life faster than the one that brought you here. We have commended you to your God, and for these few moments I believe, not in him, but in you believing in him. All the angels who have watched over you, slipshod as their tenure has been, float in this rainy West Virginia sky. After we leave, they have one more task. It's cold. I'm wearing Grandpa's long gray coat. Mud smears my black shoes. An Irish priest throws a clod of dirt as slickered workmen lean against the backhoe. Beside your plot, Grandma and Grandpa, brass markers long gone green in the industrial rain, wait. It's my mother's funeral poem for Rhett. And now I'm going to make an in-game change since none of you guys know what I was going to read anyway, and read this poem. I suppose it's a little bit more political. I'm sitting in a rocking chair. I'm trying not to rock like totally out of the picture, but if I do this and I look like I'm bursting into your living room, too bad. This is about the wall, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, and when I went there, I think my experience was like a lot of people's, that I didn't really know what I expected or what I was going to do when I got there. But I started reading the names and remembered somebody that I knew who should have been on that wall, and I was looking for him. And I'm writing about him and the experience of being at the wall. And the story of this friend of mine, Larry, is that he was the most uncoordinated kid in our neighborhood. You know, he was always big and overweight. And, you know, when we played baseball, he usually fell trying to get to second base, whether he would trip over the dirt and stuff like that. And, you know, there was not a single athletic, coordinated piece of him. And then he decided that he wanted to enlist because he wanted to be a man. He wanted to be treated like a man. He didn't want to be, I'm quite sure a lot of people called him a sissy and things like that. So, you know, he lost enough weight to pass his physical and get in the army. And the story has it that he was, within a month of getting to Vietnam, he was shot by his own men when he was walking a perimeter guard duty because he was probably making too much noise. So that's this poem called The Wall. This is the topo map of the world we have half survived, the ground we bring the bodies home to. We walk in our funeral passion, shoulder to shoulder, year after year, until the dead soar above us and we sink into the rock, meld with 50,000 etched names. I do not know that I came for this. 1967, panel 8, 32 lines down. I ask the ranger for pencil and paper, and as I rub, he blooms under my hand, suddenly too fast for my sense of history. I hold Larry W. Pierce's gray block memory and see him, awkward, slow and fat, almost blind with his thick glasses, taped frames sliding down his nose. I see him struggling to be like us, to have the same small grace we would throw into his face every day. Larry, who fell trying to run the bases, who could not hide and hide and seek, whose body seemed to radiate where he was, whose feet could not sneak back to the safety of home, where we stood in free, waiting for him to be it again. It's totally weird to do this and just like imagine that somebody other than Jennifer is out there. So if you're not out there, don't tell me, but I'm really going to hope you're out there. What am I going to do now? Oh, I'm going to read a poem from an earlier book. This one is called Dixmont, and I'm not going to read the title poem. I've been reading. My life now. I'm retired at least. I'm going to start teaching again in January, but I have nothing to do except write and walk the dog and stuff like that. So I read about 3 or 4 crime novels a week now, and it's starting to get to me. The last one I read was so evil that I don't trust anything around me anymore. And luckily, there's no people here, so it's okay. But anyway, I'm not going to read the title poem because it's about my mother in the Dixmont mental hospital, an insane asylum she was in, and it's kind of a bummer. Not going to read it. I'm going to read about death and crucifixion and people getting stuck with swords instead. When I didn't live here, I used to live out in the country, north and west of here, near this little town called Chattahoochee. And when you got off the interstate and got back on the 2-lane highway, we'd go by this, it's like a meat market butcher, and it was called Fasson's Butcher Shop, or I'm calling it that. Not really sure exactly what it was called. But anyway, they would have signs out front, usually telling you what kind of meat they had. And during hunting season, they would have venison and stuff like that. But one day the sign said "Nostalgia Racers for Christ." I'm like, Jesus, no, I didn't say that. But I'm like, whoa, And I just kept thinking about what that would be. What would Nostalgia Racers for Christ do? And I still don't know what they really do, but this is what I decided they could do. Like a sacrilegious beer mug. I swear I didn't make this up. Outside Fasson's butcher shop, the sign proclaims "Nostalgia Racers for Christ." When I tell my daughter about the wounds, I say Roman soldiers with long pointed spears jabbed him when he was on the cross. I pick Roman soldiers because essentially Romans could represent nostalgia, especially to a 5-year-old in the year 2000, and soldiers, no matter who or where or when, can be believed to jab someone with spears. It's the nature of their mission. I skipped a part of the story with the nails and the palms. I skipped the part about being God, Mary's son. That's enough. Mary, the great mother who in our house sees and protects and brings babies to those who wait 10 long years on earth. Now, as I pass the sign, I wonder if these are old stock cars roaring around a dirt track. A T-Bird, Charger, Cougar, Chevelle 396 out somewhere in the paper mill pines. And if these are old motorheads driving old muscle cars, remembering an old-time religion of slamming through gears and slick wide tires. If their Christ was better then, if it's the Christ of the Firebird mourning the coming of Camrys, minivans, and SUVs. If one needs the Cobra Jet 429, the 396, the Hemi, roaring glass packs, and a hearse on the floor, fast cars giving themselves to Jesus. Each day I see this sign and think of racing cars and the haunches of pigs, the ribs of cows, thick cut bacon, sausage, of entrails washed out to slop, of blood dripping to the sand. I didn't really read that to my daughter. That would be mean, Gonna switch books again. switching, I lost the cover on this one. It would be Setting the World in Order. I think this one, there may not be any more copies of this. So if you have one, you should sell it at auction. I'm going to read a poem. Oh, I hate when I do this. Excuse me just a second. I told Dawn I was all ready to do this. I had practiced. I had ensured that I would make no mistakes. By the way, if you were looking like I'm looking that way, there's this beautiful red, rose, and purple sunset over the top of the trailer. This is called Hanging Tobacco. And it was sometime in the early 70s. And I hitchhiked from 1971 to 77. And every now and then I'd have a really crappy car that I would drive until it broke, and then I'd hitchhike again. But I was hitchhiking or driving, I think this time. Yeah, I had an old car and I was driving down from my father's place around Pittsburgh, and I stopped to see these folks in Kentucky. And the day after I got there, one of their neighbor farmers came, and he needed some temporary help to get tobacco out of the field. You know how it is when you have to do it when it's time to do it. So, and even though we were hippies and hated to work and shunned work as much as possible, we weren't enough of a hippie to turn down a guy that needed us to work, and especially since he was paying money. So this is a poem about harvesting and hanging tobacco in a barn, which, as you can see in the poem, it's not like I recommend that one does this, but it was pretty interesting. Most work is interesting, by the way, if you only do it for 2 or 3 days. You know, you don't want to make a career out of this stuff. Bug. Hanging tobacco. Blue gauze air, laces of light bend through the barn. The peaked ceiling smells like an old bar, walls soaked in camels. It hits your tongue like your grandfather's stained fingers. He hugs your neck, his hand you taste and keep. But this is work. Love, maybe. The sweat and hurt, the one time for the hell of it. Calves and thighs flicker, hands brown and sticky, face like a dust bowl okies. This is a feeling we'd be lying to claim we want for more than a day, lying to say it doesn't feel good here, getting it done. Seventh wagon, leaves fat as Ohio catfish. Tired of jerking lead-heavy sticks from my ankles to the beams overhead, I yell down to Daniel on the flatbed, sing, it's hot up here. Chew my backer, spit my juice, gonna love my baby till it ain't no use. Whoa, baby, take a whiff on me. I'm straddling the rafters, singing into the charred roof. The song hangs in the thick air and curls around the barn. Down below, the song turns body. My hips remember a better ache, a better reason to push for the ceiling. If there's a wrong time to dream of making love, this is it. 30 feet up in a tobacco barn, no net. They say you get high on your first smoke. In the last 6 hours, I've sucked down every Pall Mall since Truman beat Dewey. Her Red River hair flows over my hands, eyes blue as the late sky outside the slatted vents of the barn. This is a dangerous business. Last spike hung, climbed down the wall like a gray spider, stretched from beam to pull the muscles long again. Whiskey cuts the stale air in our throats. Back of the truck, we're belting Lead Belly's blues. You take Sally and I'll take Sue down the red clay roads home. All right, where am I? Um, oh, I know where I am. I'm going to read two new poems that are unbooked. Poems I think they're unpublished too, I'm not sure. First one, I have this, I don't know if most poets do this, but 10 years after I left the Beaver Valley, I was still writing about it. 10 years after Gainesville, and then 10 years. So anyway, it takes me a long time to write about where I am. And I've been living on Alligator Point now for 5 or 6 years. This is a prepositional curiosity. If you live in Frostburg or in Tallahassee, you say in, like you don't live on Frostburg. But if you live on an island or on a peninsula, it's a different preposition. And I didn't realize that until I moved here, and I live on this peninsula. Maybe because there's no in, or maybe there's nothing to be in down here. I don't know. The other thing you can't see is for the last 3 or 4 months, we've had a lot of summer rain and glancing hurricanes and tropical storms. And parts of the backyard have been underwater since June. And it's starting to recede a little bit. This week was the first week I could walk out of the driveway without walking through water. But the whole backyard has been full of frogs for months now. And every now and then there'll be like herons and egrets come feed. It's like, like I got my own Wild Kingdom water feature here. But anyway, this is a poem that my friend, one of my best friends lives, I'm about a mile from the beach, and he lives actually on the beach. So we do all our socializing over there on his back porch, so we can watch the Gulf of Mexico. Besides, who wants to socialize in a trailer? Come on now. But anyway, this is a poem about us sitting on the back porch. And it's, the pandemic has been going on for quite a while in the setting of this poem. And I, as you can tell, I'm getting old. Dean's even older. So it's also a poem, I guess, about aging. Right now it's called On the Porch with the Waxing Moon. I'm not sure about that title. It seems kind of precious to me. I don't like the precious very much, but that's the title for now. And the only thing you might need to know about I don't want to make people try to puzzle this out too much, but the first line mentions longboarders, and that's a type of surfboard that, it says long. It never was much of a Florida surfboard because we don't have big enough waves. But the longboards are what folks ride in big waves in California and Hawaii and all that. So they're big, big, tall, heavy surfboards. And Dean's an old surfer, so he was a longboard guy. I'm not a surfer at all. I'm a body surfer at best, but poets don't have to tell the truth, as you know. On the porch with the waxing moon. The longboarders are old now. We sit on the porch, watch the shore break, talk about the sunset, the young family walking with their flashlights, the illegal seine netters out last night. It's the pandemic, yes, but it's what our lives have wound down to here on the edge of the land. Dog Island's few lights glimmer and sway. A shrimper runs toward Shell Point. Tonight, most nights, we don't even mention guitars, but tell slow stories about the lost and those far away. I think about telling the flashlight kids on the beach about ghost crabs and the moon. Ghost crabs are those little white crabs you see on the beach that have big old goggly eyes. They're kind of silly looking, but but they tend to, on the beach at night, they tend to go toward the moon, you know. And this poem is new as well. Now that I live down here and I'm not teaching anymore, I listen to music 6 or 8 hours a day. So it's always been a massively important part of my life. I wanted to be a songwriter. I am a harmonica player. I wanted to grow up to be James Taylor when I was young. And really the reason that I'm a writer is that, I started off writing songs, but I didn't play any instrument. So I would write these lyrics and give them to my friend Daniel, who was mentioned in that other poem. And the first couple I gave him, it was back when we were really young, freshmen in junior college. And so I gave him these lyrics. Well, actually what happened is I heard him playing a song and I thought I knew, all the songs around our time. And so I didn't know this song. I said, who wrote that song? And he goes, I did. I go, no, man, who wrote that? And he goes, no, I did. I'm like, what do you mean you wrote the song? Like, as if like only James Taylor and Muddy Waters could write songs. And he goes, I wrote it. And I'm like, whoa. And so I went to work that night at Morrison's Cafeteria and I wrote these lyrics, gave them to Daniel, and he came back a day or two later and sang my song. And so I was hooked. I was going to be a songwriter. But problem was, of course, I didn't write music. So I would write these lyrics, give them to Daniel, and then he started just taking the 2 or 3 lines he liked and putting them in his songs. And when he play them on stage, when he'd get to my lines, he would just give me a credit with one finger. And so eventually my friends decided I ought to be a poet, not a songwriter. And but anyway, point of all that is I have to wrap this up soon. The daylight is fading. The music's getting even more and more important to me now. And I've decided that I'm just taking lines from songs and not just working them into the poems. I'm writing both, like, sometimes about the song and the lyric, and sometimes the lyric just appears in the song. And I'm not sure that it even fits, and I'm not sure that I care. It's sort of like, it's like a mosaic or some sort of composition that I'm not positive about it yet. But anyway, and as it turns out, I'm not going to read that poem because I left it in the bedroom and I don't want to get up and walk there. So just imagine that I'm reading you this poem that starts off mentioning John Prine and Lake Marie, but I'm not going to read it because my time is about up. So I'm going to read one more poem and then I will be done. Sorry, that was kind of a semi-unprofessional thing to do, but I'm going to read the final poem for the night. Is from this book again, Setting the World in Order, and it's called Meditation on Today's Limit of Pleasure. It was one of the poems I published in the Georgia Review. There's this thing, the Georgia Review is the greatest magazine for me, greatest literary magazine of all. And when I published this and another poem in the Georgia Review, way back in the 80s and early 90s, I thought that I had made it, that I was famous now. It took another 25 years to realize that was probably not true, but I still really love this poem. So meditation on today's limit of pleasure. And after this, I'm going to say goodnight and probably need to take 1 minute to move into the house where there's some light and I can deal with our chats and stuff like that. All right, here you go. Meditation on today's limit of pleasure. Sometimes the cicadas come riding in wild and grow loud in the trees, like a tide that surges every few seconds. We could call it a cycle of cicada song, rising from the creek, rattling the hardwood leaves and soaring into the loblollies until they seem to take off, each one a jet engine on full, flying into the sun, and a universe that hovers in the blue tomorrow, the promise early October makes. I want to be the man, the god, the recording engineer who sits far off in the lost bower of harmonics, turning the knob marked cicada, turning it past 4, past 5, to 7 and 8, and then backing off. Somewhere in my heart, the hint of mercy saying, we can't stand anymore. This song, this sun, this blue, these cicadas. Thank you. And if I get a chance someday, I'll read you that other John Prine poem that I didn't get to do. Thanks.
Rick, did you say that you were going to move into the house, or did you want to take questions?
I will take questions, but it's getting dark and I can't see. So it'll take me like in 1 minute, I'll actually be in the house. You'll just see me bouncing around as I go, you know. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Kind of cool. All right, I'm stable again. If I can kind of adjust the light better.
I wish that it were so easy for me to declare that I'd become stable again.
That was a metaphor. It was a spatial metaphor, not an emotional one.
So we do definitely have questions in the chat, but I feel as though I need to remark that while you were feeling as though no one else was with you, it was really nice to have the pleasure of being read to by you, as though I was the only person in the world.
Well, to me, you were.
What a treat. All right, so let me ask you some of these questions. Donna Long asks, do you choose when and whether to change your poetic style or theme, or does it happen organically? If the former, what drives the choice? If the latter, what drives the shift?
Donna is so smart. And I'm not when it comes to this stuff. And so it sounds like I'm, I don't know, it sounds like maybe I'm avoiding questions like that. But I don't think at all before I write a poem. Usually I write a poem because, I get a line. Usually I'm reading poems, like Jerry's poem that mentioned ash. And I'm like, oh man, ash, ash and soot, that used to be the theme of my life. And if that happens, I put Jerry's book down mid poem and I write my poem and then I come back later to what I was reading. So I don't have, I have styles and I have ideas of formality, but I apply them after the poem. I rarely write a formal verse or what did somebody call it online the other day? Received forms. I hate it when they like every 2 years to make a new idea, like this new term. I had to ask, so what's a received form? And they said it's just what we used to call form. And I was like, why can't we just call it form? And then it got me to thinking about what unreceived forms were. And that was going down this bizarre rabbit hole, which I didn't go to. But the answer is, without being facetious, although I know I sound facetious, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Uh, I write the whole thing out, and I write it out longhand. And so usually I have a notebook or something. I have it like probably every room in my house, including the bathroom, has a notebook in it. So when the idea hits me, I write, and I usually write the whole poem from opening line to closing line. And then, I will soon enough type it up. And then I'll decide, well, do I need stanzas? I love the triadic stanza. So that probably comes up more in my poems than anything else. But it's all after the fact. It's all the poem itself is done. It's the crafting and the tinkering, which I think is massively important. And I don't try to put that down at all. But I have never thought about writing a poem before I wrote a poem. I don't know that I'm going to write a poem about the sunrise. Richard Hugo, I think, said once that if somebody says, or if you think something deserves a poem, it probably doesn't. So everybody who tells me, oh, that ought to be a poem. And I'm like, I try to be nice and not say, no, stupid, but sorry, got itchy ankle. So anyway, Donna, I have no idea what I'm doing and when I'm going to do it and how it's going to turn out. And although the poem I didn't read, which, is, I've been doing a whole, especially when John Prine died, I did a whole lot of incorporating John Prine and John Prine lyrics into the songs. And some people, when I send these poems to them, they go, oh, you must have a theme for this new book. And I want to say no. Although if these poems turn out to be good enough and they get into the next book, I suppose if I have 15 or 20 poems, that are totally lifting song lyrics from a writer, John Prine, Jason Isbell, Bob Dylan, it's going to look conscious. It's going to look like I wanted to do it. And I can't deny that I wanted to do it, but I'm consciously doing it. Can I read it now that I found it? All right. This is the poem I talked all about on the back porch and didn't have with me. And the title is, Oh, Baby, We Gotta Go Now, which is the John Prine line. And the poem that it's referencing is his poem, Lake Marie. So this may be unfair. Maybe, I don't know if somebody's going to ask this, but I'm sorry to keep doing this, but the bugs got me when I was outside. I make a lot of references to song lyrics without telling people why, where, and who. Just like 30, 20 years ago, I figured if you didn't know everything I knew about Roberto Clemente, that was tough. Look it up. Other people quote Shakespeare. They don't bother telling you what or why, right? Or the Bible, like everybody read it and believes in it, So I don't feel compelled to tell people what song these lyrics come from. I mean, I might in a live reading setting like this, but oh, baby, we got to go now. I lived all my life somewhere below Lake Marie. Most of everything I know is there. Pittsburgh, the Ohio, flood canals out of Okeechobee. I've watched moccasins glide past the tea-green eyes of alligators and covered my face with a bandana as the Pahokee cane fields burned. I know Lake Marie, the lost daughter, like it was home, and home was always hard to find. That two-bit tract house on a hill above the tracks, apartments and trailers in South Florida, one place after another full of roaches they called college life. What's left of my hometown, shrink-wrapped in a box, mailed and lost. Lake Marie, Wohai, Ohio. I'm not done with this poem yet. I don't know. I can't justify what it does. It has nothing to do with Lake Marie. Literally, factually, whatever. Lake Marie, is like I think it's in Minnesota or Wisconsin or someplace up there. And of course, I've never been to it. And the poem's not about it. So there. Another question, please.
So this is not so much a question as a series of comments, but
Right.
Billy Weeks said, your words and environment have made for a very transcendent evening. Thank you. And as you were talking about, people knowing the references to Shakespeare in the Bible, Donna Long remarked, Shakespeare and the Bible aren't under copyright. And Bob Kunzinger replied, neither's Clemente.
Thanks, my friends. Are you my legal advisors? Well, I don't know copyright law, although I should, being a publisher for 20 years. I think I'm allowed to quote one line from John Prine. I don't know what fair use is, but as they say, there's no such thing as bad publicity. So if they want to fucking come down here to Alligator Point and arrest me for stealing a John Prine line, I say, come on down. Jasper won't get anybody. I walked in the house yesterday. Jasper didn't even wake up. So that's my dog. So yeah, Bob, sorry about that.
So Rick, this isn't a question from the chat. It's actually mine. I know that you walk often. I see your posts on social media kind of always at the same locations. And I wonder how much that walking and the repetition of spaces informs your work.
It has more, it does. Like I say, there's that time lag where many of what I would call the new poems have to do with here, and some walking on the beach, some all the roads around my place are shell roads. They're not paved. So like that, when I first got here, I was like so taken by the idea that the roads weren't paved. And Jasper and I would walk every morning down these shell rock roads and with the overhanging oak trees and Spanish moss. So there's a lot of that. And then of course there's the stars. I mean, there's no light here. There's no street lights. There's no lights at all. There's nothing between you and the stars. So a lot of things I didn't even know there were stars when I lived around Pittsburgh. Like stars, what's that? Stars were like sparks coming out of the Jones and Laughlin smokestacks. So yeah, the stars, the moon, all of that is more prevalent, or more. It appears in these poems, though I hesitate to say that I write about them. But it certainly informs the imagery. That's for sure.
Thank you. A couple more questions. Bob Kunzinger writes, I know this is a poetry reading, but you've moved into essay writing. Do you think that trend will continue? I know you've always written essays, but it seems you're paying more attention to them.
Yeah. Bob Kunzinger, by the way, is a fine essayist. And maybe one of the reasons that I'm writing more essays and started taking them more seriously over the last 7-8 years has a lot to do with Bob and our communication and sending drafts back and forth. As an essayist, he's more advanced than I am in the business part of it, as well as just his writing. So it was really important that I would send stuff to him and I would get his advice. But I have been writing. The first essay I published was in 1997. So this book coming out next year, which is my collection of essays. It's 25 years of essays, but it's my first book. That's not what I would recommend for a production schedule. You're not going to get tenure like that. But I have written a lot of essays now, and I do write more I mean, I used to just, if I wrote an essay, it was this occasional thing. I would just write one. And the first essays, if you know all my poems, you can see that the poem came first and the essay was an expansion, a gloss on that poem. Whereas now, I write essays, the essays, they have their own provenance, they have their own sense of origin. And so this book coming out in February, maybe March, it's called Sometimes the Light. And it's always been called Sometimes the Light for 25 years. I have no reason why. I can't tell you why. The line doesn't, I don't think, appear in the book at all, maybe once. And the book, I don't know what the book's about. So sometimes the light just sounds good. And, if you see my pictures on Facebook, you know that I'm like, light is what, because I take pictures of my dog and the light, and sometimes the light of my dog and this occasional dolphin. So the light's really important to me, but that absolutely postdates the book. And it's kind of weird. Nobody has brought this up yet when I mentioned the title of my book, that, it's a key line from the Grateful Dead, right? Sometimes the light's all shining on me, other times I can barely see. But my book is not at all about the Grateful Dead. Though I'm not a Deadhead, but I'm a big Grateful Dead fan. But I don't think I took that line as like homage to trucking. I just liked the line, So, but to answer Bob, yeah, I'm writing a lot more essays now. I have a couple pieces coming out in the Alabama Literary Review, as does Bob. Travel pieces I'm writing about coming back from Portal, North Dakota, coming down the Missouri River and up the Ohio, doing Lewis and Clark backwards. So I'm consciously writing essays now, and I have ideas, I have projects, which I never had before. My life has never been organized. You can look at my credit card history.
Another question for you. Donna asks, how hard is it to write about a place that is relatively idyllic, as opposed to a dying mill town on a polluted river? How do you capture it without getting sentimental?
Cool, good question. I would like to think that I was not sentimental about the dying mill town on the polluted river. And I would like to hope that I wasn't terribly harsh about it either, that it was a kind of like, it is what it is type of thing. And though I thought there was a certain element of gravitas and nobility to those steel mill towns, I didn't want to romanticize them too much. Although, if you know me, I moved away from there when I was 14. So I mythologized that. I made that place up. And I started writing about it when I started college late. I started college when I was 25. And I went to University of Florida in Gainesville. So I was the only person that even knew where Pennsylvania was, So I could say anything I wanted. They thought, fuck, man, that guy knows what he's talking about. So there was that kind of latitude. And down here, it's different. It is different. It's, there is no axe to grind. If there is an axe to grind, it's just kind of like me getting grumpy about having to drive 25 miles to get bread. But, that's really good. I'm glad there's Dean and I, like we almost want to be like Edward Abbey guys and go out and destroy the road every 5 days after they patch it up. Because one thing I really love to see these 75-foot long trailers behind the $75,000 pickup truck when they get down to the washed out dirt road and they're like, oh, I guess we can't come here. And we're like, yep, can't come here. So So it's a little bit of it. If there is any axe to grind here, it's that NIMBY thing, like, don't come here. Okay. Like, don't come here. No, we don't want a restaurant. No, we don't want a 7-Eleven. Yes, I'm willing to drive 20 miles to get, I have two choices. I can drive 30 miles north to the good grocery store, or I can drive 20 miles down the Gulf of Mexico to the substandard grocery store where they don't even have good bread. But you get to drive for 17 miles with the Gulf of Mexico within 3 feet of your car. So, you learn to eat crappy bread. So yeah, to answer Donna's question, I'm actually, I think, less narrative and more imagistic now. I'm going to let the moon do its work. I'm going to let the stars let that show. I'm not investing things in as much personal narrative or political narrative or historical narrative. I think I'm more of a camera now than the Pittsburgh poems are stories. The Alligator Point poems are pictures, I would say.
And you can present a picture without sentimentality.
Probably, although, tell Norman Rockwell that, this is my greatest new hat.
It's complimented in the chat earlier by, let me find it.
Well,
by Donna, actually.
I wouldn't have this hat if it wasn't for Donna, so she can compliment it all she wants.
Well, so given kind of where we are in the time, it's probably a pairing of comments in the chat that I can give you. George Drew writes, "Great evening, Rick, thanks." Sure. And Dean Newman writes, "Scratch Jasper's ears and tell him I said hello." And so maybe from all of us, scratch Jasper's ears. And if I can take the moment to say, please feel welcomed to participate in the rest of our Western Maryland Indie Lit sessions tomorrow. They're all available through YouTube, as you found Rick's reading. You'll also find those events. We're so grateful for your being with us this evening, and I am so grateful to Rick Campbell for reading and making me feel like the only person in the world. Also nice to know of another James Taylor fan. But
I'm glad there are other people out there, and I have to miss a little bit of tomorrow's thing because I'm going to Apalachicola to hear Dean play music. So Dean Newman is a really fine guitar player, singer, songwriter, who's been my friend half of a lifetime, half of mine. He's way old, half of my life. He's a lot older than I am. So thanks, Dean and George, Donna, Bob, if anybody else is out there. Thank you too. Thanks, Jennifer. Are we done? Start the show.
Okay, we should be